Of course, I was hoping to be feasting on some duck today during the game. I figured we'd at least get a little nibble, but instead, I'm here to ingest a copious amount of crow because the Oregon Ducks put on a show for the ages in what very well may have been the end of an era for Cowboy faithful.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your top stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at AllDayOState. Today, we're partially brought to you by Game Time Tickets. Make sure that you download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Give it the best in the ticketing industry with Game Time today. Meanwhile, we get to slide into this conversation that is naturally going to hurt the heart of several in Cowboy country. We very well may have witnessed the beginning of the end. With the pressure from the Board of Regents in the offseason coming into the season, I think it's pretty common knowledge that Mike Gundy was going to have to get Oklahoma State back to the levels that we're used to, which is 8, 9, 10 wins, right? That's where Oklahoma State has been for well over 90% of Mike Gundy's career, being the head man on the sidelines. Was there kind of disrespect with the money line? Yeah. Did I really think that the Oregon Ducks were going to win by 29 plus? Abso-flippin-lutely not. Why? Because you go back historically, and that's not typically a thing. Like, sure, there were some years that OU would beat us, for the rights to the Big 12 title, and the score would be lopsided, whether it be 44-10 or 52-14 or something to that effect. Texas, before we had, 12 out of 15 years of success against them, they used to put up comparable numbers against Oklahoma State. If you go back to 2005, Mike Gundy's first season, where we just won a few games, none of those matchups were as devastating as this one. You go back to 2000, where Oklahoma State lost 58-0 to Texas Tech. Not great, but it's not a 66-point drubbing by an opponent. Oklahoma State has never, to my knowledge, looked that completely inept. Originally, I had already designed a segment 1 for today, and that segment 1 was going to be, this number of players, even though we didn't win, is good enough to start at Oregon. So I assume maybe Wendell Gregory, Jaleel Johnson, Terrell Davis, Christian Fitzpatrick, Brian McCoy. I figured some of those dudes would pop up in this conversation of, yeah, we didn't win, but at least we now know that these 4, 5, 3, 4, whatever individuals are good enough to start at Oregon. Unfortunately, I didn't get to count any. I mean, Brian McCoy did okay. Trent did okay. I mean, we'll talk about some of that in segment 2, but all in all, it was very apparent that there's levels to this. And even though Oklahoma State, during Mike Gundy's entire tenure up until this previous season, we could have played with anybody. In 2011, we should have played for a national title. From 2011 all the way through the Mason Rudolph days with James Washington and whether it be Tyreek Hill, it didn't matter. Oklahoma State was good enough to compete with anybody. Any team in the top 5 in the country did not want to play Oklahoma State for the better part of 18 seasons. That's because the Cowboys could compete with any team in America. Were we likely to win against the top 3 teams? Typically not. And if you go back and look, there's evidentiary proof from all of the matchups in Bedlam that equaled Big 12 titles, that top 3, top 5 games, even though we didn't win, they were close. Oklahoma State has never been drugged behind the woodshed and taught a thing or 17 before like that ball game. Never once, ever. I've been attending games since 95. Dad got season tickets in 1997. So I've seen some absolute drubbings. I've seen us get beat up a significant amount. Never like that. Never to that degree. And Mike Gundy mentioned that we're spending $7 million this year. If that is true, that's a disaster, right? Because it seemed as though we were being much more aggressive in the NIL era, in the transfer portal. And you look at some of the other teams in the Big 12, like Tech spending almost 30, BYU being in the low 20s, Kansas State being 14, 15-ish range. Houston supposedly is even creeped up to the 10, 11 range. So Oklahoma State should be right in that $13 million range. So if it is true that we've only spent $7 million this year, here's your sign. And there was some conversation out there about Mike Gundy letting it be known that this is what a big money roster looks like, and Oklahoma State doesn't have that. So he was almost setting an expectation that Cowboy Country needs to dial it down a bit on the upset, or even keeping it within 1 or 2 scores. And that's okay. If Oklahoma State would have lost this game by 21, I think all of us could look back and say, yeah, well, that's probably the best team we have ever played the game of football against, at least in our lifetimes. That is the most complete team I've ever seen Oklahoma State play. They may have been the most talented team I've ever seen play, period. Right? There's a reason that they went 13-0 last season. There's a reason that they were, very high up on all of the transfer portal boards for a destination school. Is the money gap a problem? Yes, it is. But this is also another layer as to why we may have just witnessed the end of an era. I don't think the Board of Regents is going to let that slide. I believe that there was probably some phone calls already being made at the latter half of that game. Maybe it's not, hey, we need to get rid of Gundy, but it was probably some phone calls discussing, hey, do we have this buyout? Like, we just shaved $15 million off of his buyout from this previous season to make it somewhat manageable. So is Mike Gundy's buyout being at $15 million now going to have the ability to get met after that performance? Yeah, probably. Like, there's no doubt there was a couple big-time heavy hitter donors that were having a couple extra Jack and Cokes that were already on the horn like, this cannot happen. This is unforgivable. This we cannot look away from. I think you could make the argument that there was a lot of pressure on Mike Gundy to at least get Oklahoma State back to where they're typically accustomed to being, which is in that 8-win ball club. Right around 8 to 10 wins has traditionally been Mike Gundy's barometer for a normal season, not even necessarily quote-unquote successful. And unfortunately, in today's age of college football, we just witnessed what can happen if you get too far behind the 8 ball. Maybe it's Mike Gundy just too slow to embrace the NIL and transfer portal era. Maybe that's it. Maybe he legitimately did think that it was just going to be a thing that lasted for a couple of seasons and then the NCAA would kind of force it to fizzle itself out. Maybe he genuinely did believe that. But whatever the case really truly is, we cannot stay competitive like this at this pace in today's age. And now I wonder how many donors are going to be lining up to double our NIL. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. If that's what a $7 million roster looks like, then we have no shot at ever being competitive again if we cannot get at least to that 10, 11, 12 mil range. If we can't get there, it's because we're not alluring the right people. And you have to at least be willing to make the argument that there's possibly some donors that probably would pony up some more money, but maybe they want it with new blood. Maybe they don't feel like giving their money away to a Mike Gundy-led ball club. Do I agree with it? Not necessarily. All right, I came into this season firmly believing that Mike Gundy should get another season after this year, unless something absolutely disastrous happens, like another 3-win season. And maybe we don't win 3 games. Maybe we win more. But the talent gap between the top 5 club and Oklahoma State right now is possibly bigger than it's ever been. And it's funny. I went back on X and I put this thing out here because I wasn't in the stadium during those 10-1, 1-9 seasons. I wasn't in the stadium. So I asked that group and several, 99% of them, there was one individual that said, no, we had some worse teams back then in the early 90s than that team. But 99% of the people that were in the stands when we were winning 0 ball games, they're pretty unanimous, or you know what I'm saying. They all collectively, unanimously, thank you. Words are hard for me, but I'd get there. They pretty much unanimously, other than that one individual I found on X, has said that no, this was worse because that team kept fighting. That team was showing heart. That team was scratching, crawling, climbing, kicking, punching, screaming, whatever they had to do to get opportunities on the field and to give their self a moment of ability to potentially get to the next league, the next level. So more often than not, the people that say you cannot get rid of Mike Gundy because you weren't here for the 10-1 days, even those people pretty overwhelmingly have come out in the last couple days and said, yeah, this was worse. So whether you think this is the worst loss since 2000 or the worst loss since 1970 or the worst loss since 1989 or the worst loss since 1917, wherever you fall in that camp, it's pretty acknowledged that this is, hands down, not even close, the worst loss in Mike Gundy's era, both as a player and a coach. And at this point in time, with the pressure that he was facing from the Board of Regents coming into the season, after this debacle, it might take Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy winning like 7-8 games in a row to cancel out this. And even then, though, I have to admit, it's probably not great for the Big 12. For the rest of the season, if Oklahoma State beats anybody in the Big 12, the gut reaction is automatically going to be, well, that team is not very good because look what happened when Oklahoma State played a good football team. So if Oklahoma State upsets a Kansas State or a Texas Tech or Iowa State, then it's actually, perception-wise, going to be worse for the Big 12. That's when you know you're in a precarious position as a fan base moving forward. It's a new landscape. And I genuinely thought that by firing everybody and bringing in all of these SEC coaches and all of these SEC Big Ten players was going to make us significantly better than last season. Talent and depth was seemingly a little bit of a problem last season to go alongside with some of the coaching complacency, things of that nature. But this team, with all of the UCLA, LSU, Ohio State, Tennessee, doesn't matter, wherever, Vanderbilt, all of these transfers that started at some point in time at that big time Power 4 schools, they didn't live up. They didn't do much. We didn't do much. And I wasn't mad the entire time. It was never I'm so angry, I want to throw stuff. And I've been there. I was there last season. So angry, I wanted to punch holes in the walls. That didn't happen Saturday. It was more of a reflective, like, oh, man, this probably is the end. And you can be a Gundy hater through and through. But seeing a legend go out the wrong way, it's not fun. And I don't think it's a great look. What would have been best is for Mike Gundy to go out on top. And it's still a possibility. But now we're going to have to make a run at Arlington. And that ball game didn't, unfortunately, look like a roster of very many dudes that could get us there. But you need to make sure that you're squared away no matter what's happening with the opening whistle already been blown on the season. Get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts at your doorstep as early as tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business are available for you. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects into the future. While their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side protected, get the right Trade Master program today. If you need parts for a project, Supply House has next day delivery available. Their part finder tools with 3D schematics can save you hours on jobs where every detail matters, and their Trademaster perks like priority shipping, dedicated support, make the process much smoother for you. So join this free Trademaster program today and score those serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That is supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service, and make sure that you go get the best with the real savings with Supply House. Not done yet. Game Time has something to say because college football is officially back, right? We can all be excited with the tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, because there's not much in life like it. But we can also be realistic. We all know that actually getting tickets can feel much more like the battle than the battle that's happening on the field. With the endless waiting and hidden fees and prices jumping at checkout, get rid of that. Use Game Time today, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you'll pay. The app makes it super simplistic. You can even see the exact view from your seat before you buy. Honestly, it's going to be faster, cheaper, and less stressful than anything else out there. So take the guesswork out of you buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create that account, redeem that code, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, all one word, for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. All you have to do is download Game Time today for the bee's knees of all of your ticketing needs. So since we didn't necessarily get to do X, Y, and Z players are good enough to start for Oregon, at least we got to see some bright spots. And I think statistically speaking, what we gave up, like 266 to Dante Moore, that's another section of crow that I definitely have to eat. I was hooting and hollering about how Oregon has NFL talent all over the field, but if there's a susceptibility in the Oregon attack that Oklahoma State can exploit, it was going to be Dante Moore. And I firmly believe that guys like Jaleel Johnson and Wendell Gregory and Brian McCoy and Brandon Rawls were going to make life difficult on Dante Moore. That didn't happen, Captain. And yes, I do know Brian McCoy led the team in tackles once again with 9, but as Addicted to Quack broke down that there's some of the big plays in the UT Martin game were actually given up by assignments missed by Brian McCoy. So even though he had 14 tackles, it was somewhat misleading because some of their chunk plays came off of things that he didn't do quite right. And I think if you look at this game, it's going to be comparable once again. He had a nice day overall, but there was moments where he should have potentially made plays. But ironically enough, as bad as we looked, I don't necessarily think this one is on the players. I think defensively, at least, which was our hope coming into the ballgame. I think we all knew that offensively it was going to be a difficult task. But there was tons of hope that defensively, guys like Cam Smith will hold their own. And Cam actually did play decent until his injury. But let's call a spade a spade. The other side of the field, Cam Smith, it was not good. It was not good at all. Parker Robertson, great story. But it's just, if it doesn't work, I don't know. I mean, perhaps we're rewarding some things that we should be as opposed to just pure talent. And if that's the case, then maybe they just need to come out and say it, right? Why not come out and say, Parker Robertson may not be the best safety we have on the roster, but he is starting because he shows up to everything right. He's always on time. He pays attention to class, whatever the reasonings are. But Parker Robertson and Cale Smith looked way out of their depths in this ballgame. Christian Fitzpatrick had a couple nice plays. Terrell Davis didn't really get a ton of opportunities. We didn't really get G Freaky out there rocking and rolling. With some of the instability potentially at quarterback, the fact that we never saw something fun, 0 trick plays. We didn't even really try to hammer the ball deep down the field much. And at some point in time, you just got to hit the effort button, right? When you're down 20-0 or 28-0, like eventually you just got to be like, you know what, Zane, let it fly. If you throw 5 picks, that it is what it is. We didn't do that. We weren't very aggressive. We didn't try to hit home runs. I know he wasn't getting very much time. The O-line did get, they got demolished all day. But bright spot, thank you, Trent Howland. Trent Howland, the big body beast, 6'3", 245-pound, leading Indiana rusher, comes to Oklahoma State, gets his opportunity against Oregon, drives us down the field. And in the game, I was all sorts of angry because why would you hand the rock off to somebody who drives you all the way down the field pretty much by himself? Like Trent Howland drove us down the field and gave us hope, gave us an opportunity to score a touchdown. And then we get in the goal line and we start randomly throwing it. Handing the ball off to the big dude is what got us all the way down the field. And then we get all the way down there and we start throwing it. Well, turns out Howland hurt his ankle. So the one bright spot for all Oklahoma State fans to look back and say, okay, this didn't go well. This didn't look good. This wasn't very well performed. But at least that big body beast, number 24, looked like he belonged. Would Trent Howland have started at Oregon? Maybe not. Probably not. But Trent Howland showed that even he was good enough to be on that field to play against or with the Oregon Ducks. And now he's injured. So the season starts off with 2 touchdowns and 3 drives from Haas Haney. And we got a guy. We got a dude that's going to lead us to the promised land and potentially back to Arlington. He goes down. And this is after Jalen Beckley, after Miguel Chavez, after Louis Canepa, after Tyler Brumfield, all offensive linemen, by the way. Then you lose Kason Carpenter at least 4 portions of this previous game. And then we know Deshaun Brown's going to be out for a little bit. We knew Rodney was a little bit banged up here and there. Io Shotomi King, a little bit banged up here and there. And then we have a running back do some productive stuff, and he's injured. And we didn't see Sessi. So the guy who was the most productive the previous game didn't get to play. And the guy who was the most productive in this game gets injured right after giving us some hope. It almost feels like this was a cursed season before it started. I'm not a big injuries guy, but these things keep popping up. And it's the worst timing of all time for Mike Gundy in a year that I think he undoubtedly knew that his back was up against the wall and the Board of Regents weren't exactly thrilled with the product and how he got his new contract. So to have all of these injuries at pretty key spots 2 weeks into the season, it's bad. But thankfully, we do get a bye week, the same bye week that sounded ridiculous before the season. Now we're kind of thankful for it. Before we get on off here, we do have to talk about an old school legend. I got a quick question for all college football fans out here. If you could go back in time and sit front row at your school's biggest rivalry game, what hat would you be wearing? Yes, I said hat, the lid that's on top of your head. For me, why not go with an OG? Get the game on your head today. These are not just hats. They're the same vintage style that fans wore back in the 80s and 90s. And guess what? They still go for the same prices they did back then too. You can use code LOCKEDON, all one word, to get your vintage hat for $16.99. Head on over to thegamecaps.com. That is thegamecaps.com. Grab your team's classic bar or retro circle design and use code LOCKEDON for an exclusive discount because legends wear the game. So make sure this is your opportunity to be a legend throw on a game hat. All right, we'll make this quick before we skedaddle on off of here. If you know the game's over by halftime, and it's very visibly over by halftime, why would we make the same mistake as this previous season and not get the young guys more playing time? I mean, traditionally, that's what you do. Whenever you get up by 21, 24 points, that's when you start sprinkling the younger guys. Not only to get them reps, get them used to the game speed, but from a film perspective, it's beneficial for you in diagnosing what they need to fix, but it's also beneficial for them in showcasing to a new staff at the same college or a new staff at a different college moving forward. The gamesmanship idea of I'm going to keep him off the field just so other teams don't have film on him, those days are dead. Those days are gone. And last year, we could have gotten so much more out of Noah McKinney and Jason Queso-Brooks if they'd have just played, because there were several games where they should have been playing. Not to mention the fact that they may have been grading out better than Birmingham and Wilson throughout the course of the season. But even if they were close to neck and neck, and you know the season is derailing catastrophically, you have to sales pitch these guys on why they should stay, right? And not giving them any playing time is probably not the best recipe for success. And I get it. You pay a decent amount of money to a bunch of upperclassmen, and they need to get their minutes. They need to get their film. They need to get their time to shine. But you still have to be a football coach, right? There still has to be that line that you draw in the sand where, okay, now we've crossed over to where there's no hope. So why don't we get some of our younger dudes more playing time so at the end of the season, when people are potentially exploring in the transfer portal, that these dudes can't use I never got any playing time against me. I mean, for starters, secondarily, we're already seeing that depth is a concern because we've already had so many injuries at pretty crucial areas that we should be putting ourselves in a position that the more depth that we have at certain spots is going to be the most beneficial for the Cowboys moving forward through the course of the season. That was one of the biggest mistakes that was very obvious last year. Like we talked about, some of our highest paid NIL dudes literally physically walking on the field during the plays while the running backs running by them. They're walking on the field. And instead of doing something about it and pulling them off the field and putting in somebody who is super hungry to either get a scholarship or get more NIL money or have an opportunity to compete for a starting job the next season, go put in the hungry dudes. Right? We talked about it last year, and it never happened. We kept over and over. Like, if we're down by 20, going in the fourth, down by 30, down by 40, just put in the dudes. Give them opportunities, because maybe they'll outplay the guys making the big boy dollar bills. And maybe that's part of the game that we're missing is, maybe this dude's not as quote-unquote talented, but you know what? He does the right thing every single day, and he's good enough to be on this 105 roster limitation. So let me give him some reps. And maybe, just maybe, like you saw out of the Colorado third-string quarterback, you put a third-stringer out there that's so hungry to get NIL money or to get a scholarship or to get a spot or to be part of the travel roster. Maybe they're so flipping hungry that they make stuff happen that the dudes making 15, 20 grand a month just are not doing. It's not all money, but what are we saving players for? I don't get it. Like, at this point in time, you ain't hiding nobody, because if Mike Gundy doesn't have a super successful season, we might be looking at a mass exodus anyways, just because it's the nature of the beast in today's landscape. It's going to be hard to get all the recruits that we have to stay unless the Cowboys do something pretty crazy and make a run. We're going to have to make a run. It is possible. We have enough individual talent. I still think that if we scheme them up better, that we'll have a chance. The schemes in this last game were not good. We got out schemed. But we can fix that moving forward. And I hope that we do, because we have to have faith in this season. All righty, y'all. all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, you know I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in. Make this your first listen here in Locked On Oklahoma State. Hit the like button if you liked it. Dislike if you didn't. My podcast people out there, you're everything. Later, taters.